I had a conversation with somebody the other day I picked up the phone, she called me and I picked up the phone and she said, just like before she even said hi, she said, there's a new mental health thing that I'm hearing and I have it. And I was like, okay, what is this? And she said, moral injury. I'm just feeling moral injury about stuff. And I thought that's such an interesting term. Welcome to It's Interesting You Say That. Each week, we dive into personal strength, mental resilience, and emotional balance. I'm Jennifer Dillon, a nonprofit leader and resilience expert, and Tyler is a professional coach. We come from different backgrounds and different generations. I'm a bleeding heart liberal. He voted for Trump. But each week, we have a deep, meaningful conversation about the world today. We're glad you're here. If I say moral injury, what do you think of? And do you feel like you ever get that? Or is that part of your burnout?
You know what? I never thought about it like that, but I think a lot of the things I tend to think about when I get to emotionally burnt out or mentally burnt out is because I'm in the background, I'm trying to figure out some larger ethics or principle issue. And it's not necessarily the thing at hand, because typically it's pretty easy. It's just, do I do it or do I not do it? Or how do I do it in a way that I'm not detaching from my soul?
I think we go through our day having to absorb the fact that, life seems really unfair, or I try really hard to do something and I can't do it. It doesn't, and the person next to me seems to just not do anything and they get everything. I mean, just all of these messages are constantly coming at us and we're absorbing them. And at some point, you're not even you physically feel it, but it's emotionally, morally, you feel what are the rules here? You go to school and the rules are, okay, come here and come to class and sit quietly and ask questions and take the test and then you'll get an A. Something like that, right? There's no rules for this. Nobody gets to get the A, and people who don't deserve to get the A get the A. I just it's pretty.
It is. And I think a lot of the conclusions I typically come to are they don't help with the sense of fairness. If you were to break down that feeling of what's fair and how things should be versus how they are, maybe one, how do you just view that just circumstance? It just kind of is what it is sometimes, but then also how do you personally cope with it when you see it?
Well, for me, the concept of morality is connected with the larger sense of who we are as humanity, or as people existing, in this dimension. Why were we put here in a circumstance, that yin yang thing that we talked about, where there are opposites, there's up and down and black and white, and then we're put in these circumstances where we're constantly fighting that and trying to understand which side we're on and justifying which side we're on. But we're seeking recognition for doing the right thing, which to me, my definition of the right thing is I'm not doing harm to other people if I can help it. And I'm actually doing good for other people if I can help it. And by doing that, we're collectively creating a better environment, a better place for everybody to exist. So it's little things like if I go to the grocery store and, I walk in front of somebody while they're looking at something on the grocery store aisles, I say, excuse me, it's those little things, those little moments that make me feel like, okay, we're all connected and we're all trying to do better here. And so the morality comes from that. So then you apply it to what am I doing? How am I raising my child? Or how am I working? Or things like that. And then I see violations of that all the time. And I see rewards for violation of that. And it's so infuriating. And then the battle is, do I become like them? Because that's how you fight. You fight on their ground. Or do I continue in my, I want to make the world a better place. And meanwhile, they trample all over you and make you look like a fool.
So something I personally deal with, but I'd like to say, if maybe this is something you deal with too, is you have those moral conflicts, or maybe a conflict in trying to understand or navigate the new and emerging landscape successfully and morally? And then do you ever get confused by your own triggers or traumas? Like, does that add like another dimension to it for you?
Oh, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, look how complicated we are. So then we're walking through life going, that thing happened to me in childhood, or I've always felt like this, or that wasn't fair. So, yeah, we're just these layers of complications and rolling around and trying to, oh, I don't even know, trying to win at life and trying to win over at other people with the game against other people. What compels you to do your work? Like morally, is there like a moral compulsion to do what you're doing?
Yes and no. I think my current framework of what is moral aligns with what I do.
Mhm.
But I also have to be, I don't know, this almost selfish about it too, because I have to be interested in the work. I don't want to be, have the work I do be a ball and chain, because I don't think I'm that effective when I feel like it is. And, but then kind of comes in that moral question of, if there's work that needs to be done, no matter what the work is, should you do it whether you want to or not? And I think that's kind of like maybe kind of where money comes in. Do you go serve, the billion-dollar businesses, or do you just kind of, or like, do you work in your backyard?
Mhm.
And there might be benefits to both. Um, and I think kind of where I'm at is it doesn't have to be either or. If you see something that needs to be done and you can do it, go ahead and do it. But if you see an opportunity that interests you and you feel like you can do it, you should probably go ahead and do that too. And that black and white thinking has been something that's really, I think, limited me in a lot of ways, because I think, well, either I'm all moral and good, or I'm all selfish and bad.
Mhm.
Or, I work with these people or I work with these people. I do it this way or do it that way. And I think it just kind of kept me, I think it kept very big constraints on who I felt I could be and what I thought I could do. And now that I'm trying to break down those barriers and thinking, what if like, I can be a complex, nuanced person and be interested in this sort of thing and this sort of thing. But I think maybe what I'm trying to go for is some medium where, like, my personal interests are met, my personal needs are met. What I see sometimes, especially working with, I think people on both sides of the socioeconomic spectrum, is that there's always this pull towards, like, I have to make money. Like, people want to do good, but people also want to make money. And I think that becomes the driver. And I don't think it's always for economic reasons. I think it's for status reasons. I think it's for comparison reasons. And I think there has been maybe a fundamental sort of shift where, or maybe not. Maybe I'm not experienced enough to say there's been a fundamental shift, but what I'm personally seeing is that spark in people, or that connection to one's soul is not there, and it's being replaced by ideas, and it's being replaced by narratives where people aren't necessarily making up their own minds about what they want to do and how they want to live and who they want to be, but they're taking someone else's idea of where they should live or who they want to be or what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, well, it used to be that way, that you grew up and your parents told you, you should go to this school and this is what you should study, particularly like immigrant. I think there's a lot of pressure for first generation. So immigrant, and I heard this somewhere, and I think it's kind of funny, I guess. In a movie I saw recently where it's like the the way it goes is that the immigrant comes into this country and they work in whatever they can do. They're driving taxis, they're delivering pizzas, they're, working in a factory. And then their kids are, really funneled into, we sacrificed all this stuff for you, and you're going to college, and you're going to be the best college, and you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer, or a scientist, something like that. And then then their kids, that third generation, ends up, the quote from the movie was, ends up in the mom's basement smoking pot all day. right? So there's like this diminishment of that moral guidance or that pressure, however you want to put it, to do a certain thing, to be a certain way. And I mean, the thing about being an American has always been, I get to decide, I make my way. I can start out as an immigrant with $5 in my pocket and become a millionaire or billionaire. Or I can, make sure that my kids have a great, and you mentioned this the other day, how, your parents sacrifice so that you could have things that they didn't have. And that is possible here. And there is very much this kind of sense of upward movement, whether that works out for people or not. And I think that if we're trying to connect our moral compass with our work, and I think we're at a point where a lot of people feel very much compelled to do that. So I think there's a lot of questions around, who we are, what we want to do in our lives, and what we think of in terms of our morality and the work that we do. And I've always felt that there's that connection between our own personal trauma and what we end up thinking is moral. So, for example, if I had personal trauma in my childhood where I was neglected or treated with disrespect or abused, I might then take that into my work and say, I want to protect people from that. I don't want to do it to them. Now, there are some people that take that abuse and they use it as a platform to create further abuse. That's what they know, or they've been damaged by that abuse so badly that that's what they do. So there's a through line for me, the way that I see it, there's a through line from trauma to how you design your morality. It's a dog eat dog world, or I've got to protect people so they don't go through what I went through. That's how I heal my pain, is by healing other people's pain. And then they find work that supports that. And in that work, so you can be a social worker and find lots of meaning in that work, and that's connected to your trauma and your morality, and you stay in that work because of that, or a teacher, or, people who just don't make a lot of money. Or you could be like, I'm going to make tons of money and I don't give a shit who I hurt, because that's the way the world is. And there's a lot of people who think on both ways, and what's moral depends on who you ask.
What do you think about like religion and morality? Does that provide kind of like the center point for like general morality? Or if it's not one, I guess, are you religious? But two, if you're not, then for non-religious and maybe in the secular world, what is that guiding like set of principles or morality that we should kind of go for?
I think it's a very interesting thing, because religion can be used as a sword, or it can be used as a blanket. It can be used as a shield. It can, it gets used by people. But the basic idea that, for Buddhism, that there's suffering in the world, and you can see it. And if you see that and you accept it, it makes life, not that you accept suffering and you want to suffer, but you recognize that suffering is part of what the world is made of. That's how I understand kind of one of the tenets of Buddhism. And then you look at Christianity, and I think the golden rule, like, treat people the way you want to be treated, is such a great guide. It's a simple, beautiful way of just saying, this is how you live your life. And I mean, I don't know, were you raised religious? Do you have like a religious connection to your morality at all?
I think I like the philosophy of Taoism and balance, and like everything kind of just works and everything is whole and everything. But I there's something comforting in like Christianity, or like it's not just the universe and everything, works together in some vague and weird way, but like there is something that is creating that order. So I'm kind of stuck between both. I like the idea of the freedom and the balance, but I also like the idea that there is some sort of order to it. And that's not something I've been able to kind of reconcile. And I think both have very usable and practical morals that can be applied, whether you're religious or not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting how the way that you describe that is really antithetical to how a lot of people think we should be living. They find it very offensive that we can take parts of different religions and just come up, cobble it together and make it our own. And that's, to me, such a fundamental right to be able to create your own morality and not be told this is what you should follow. And if you don't, I mean, that used to be, boy, if you were born into Catholic Church or, any kind of, or like you said, Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, you were told what to believe in and you better believe it. And if you didn't, you're out or you're going to be in big trouble. So I think this is a huge thing that has happened in the past, century or so, that people openly and happily say, I follow a little bit of this and I believe a little bit of that. And I think part of what we're experiencing right now in the world is a rejection of that freedom. The battle has been for a long time that you have to go through somebody else in order to talk to God. It's kind of like that strict father thing. Like there's a hierarchy you've got to follow. And you're not supposed to go directly to God. You're not good enough. You're not clean enough. You're not important enough. You have to come through us. And that was one of the things that Jesus, and I have read the Bible, and particularly the New Testament, but Jesus went to the Pharisees, kind of these guys that were, with the big hats and we're in charge and we know what's going on. And he said, nobody needs to go through you. They can talk directly to God. He's their father just like he is everybody else's. You don't have to do that. And boy, they didn't like that. And I think that authoritarian drive that some people have, that a lot of the world is going through right now, comes from the fear of what you were just talking about, which is I'm going to pick a little bit here, a little bit there, and I'm going to create my own morality.
The scariest part about that, for me at least, is I think when you do that, you don't have clear answers, and you have to figure it out for yourself, which I don't think is bad, but I also think it provides a lot of there's a certain degree of chaos in that, to not say like I'm committed to Christianity or I'm committed to Buddhism, and like what you do and how you live is pretty clear. But if you say I'm going to pick a little bit of this and a little bit of this, then it's all of a sudden like your own responsibility to figure out how, like, your own stuff and how you're going to go about it, which I think it's necessary right now. But a thought in the back of my head is like how, if Christianity or Buddhism or whatever has been around for this many years, like, am I really going to come up with something that works better? But then at the same time, like, I think all these religions have their issues and they've had their moments in history where they did some really horrible things. And I think maybe that is where my misalignment is. It's like, well, if that is supposed to be the supreme good, but this group of people, like the Crusades, not the best thing. And so, but at the same time, maybe not throwing out the baby with the bathwater and realizing, I think there is some good here, but maybe for where we are, it doesn't all apply. And in a weird way, I think it can be easy to substitute that moral or that religious or that spiritual side of yourself with culture. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, we have the social media culture, we have the, I'm going to climb to the top of the ladder culture, but they don't really suffice for like a set of actually strong code or something, or of ethics. It's like the Wild West right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is particularly right. Nothing's particularly wrong. And it's almost like every individual is out there just to kind of fend for themselves and figure it out.
Well, and isn't that interesting that in a way you can say that a lot of what is going on right now, the conflicts that we have culturally, are really conflicts about what is moral. So if you look at, for example, wokeness, quote unquote wokeness, like woke culture, there is a part of the country and maybe a part of the world that says you are not allowed to. It's hard for me to describe how people look at wokeness on the other side, because obviously I'm a woke person. I believe in wokeness, right? but what they do is they have said that people who believe in wokeness, if I can say this right, are people who are trying to make themselves victims and more important than other people because of their victimization. And then they're putting that information out there uh, and forcing us to see their victimization and then to make it right. I see wokeness as these are just factual things that happened in our history, and if we don't recognize it, we are building on a bad foundation. So wokeness is about recognizing, having your eyes open, that we live in systems that are oppressive, and they're man-made systems that are used to control people. And when we recognize that, we can unshackle ourselves because we don't have to go along with those systems. And those systems sometimes, like we've been talking about, are religious systems that say you have to do what we say because our religion says that we're on top. Like, we're the men, so we get to be on top of the world because our religion says that. So, or that you're not allowed to point out things that you see are wrong because you're now playing with the hierarchy. So, but my morality comes into play and says it's immoral for us to not recognize when we have, harmed the Native Americans, harmed African Americans, harmed women, harmed people who are LGBTQ. We have done that. So let's stop doing that by being awake and recognizing we do that, and let's change our ways. As simple as that. That to me is highly moral. But to someone else, that is clashing with their morality, which says we are not supposed to have abortions, and we're not supposed to, marry outside of our race, and we're not supposed to, we're supposed to be manifest destiny and take over countries, and then we're supposed to extract what they have and take it as the spoils of our wars. That to me is highly immoral, terribly immoral. But that's the clash of morals that we're going through.
I saw this speech by, I think his name is Jonathan Pageau. Pageau. I think he's a religious scholar or a philosopher. Excuse me if I'm wrong. I doubt he'll hear me say that. But he was saying that like in COVID, during COVID, we put we kind of replaced God with safety. So, we're doing the vaccines, we're doing this, and then we kind of slowly went down the line and said, like, we're not going to do schools, or you have to have your card, or, down the line and kind of taking away more and more freedom because safety was at the top of things. And that's, to a certain extent, like, yes, we need to be safe, we need to do these things. But somewhere down the line, there's a barrier where safety is not the most important thing. And so when you're speaking about the wokeism or the wokeness, I wouldn't say I'm woke. I wouldn't say I'm on the other side either. But my perspective is, like, yes, we need, I guess, to kind of go to the whole DEI thing, like, yes, we need diversity. I think diversity is great. We should have lots of different perspectives, and we should be able to civilly come together to figure out what the best way forward is, whether that's an organization or a company or a country. Because I think the more minds you put together, like, two minds are better than one. And different perspectives coming together to find the best route forward for everybody, I think, is better. Equity, inclusion, I think, yeah, that's perfect. But I think somewhere down the line, it became, now I don't want to get this wrong, but you're putting diversity, equity, inclusion, and at the expense of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, so for like a certain group of people, it's diversity, equity, inclusion. You're Black, you're gay, you're a woman, great. Diversity, equity, inclusion. You're white, you're straight, you're male, no diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think, well, yes, maybe straight white males tend to be in the areas that we're trying to get included into, but that's not an excuse to I don't know, say something about them, or to exclude them, or to not allow that diverse or that specific mindset or frame of thinking into what we are collectively trying to do. And I think,
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Well, not just for straight white males, but I think that is where the wokeism saw so much backlash, and I think that's why the extreme kind of rose up, like the fascist neo Nazis, the conservatives, the you can't get abortions and everything. And like I don't believe in all that. I think abortions, like, you should be able to get them. I don't think they should be super common, but I mean, you should be able to make your choice. We do want more kids, but there are certain circumstances and certain people's preferences where maybe like you shouldn't be a parent, or like maybe it's not the best thing. And I think there's that certain amount of nuance where, like, again, it kind of comes back to like there's not this one overarching principle, and like you kind of have to pick and choose, but it has to be somewhat nuanced, because we're not all going to agree, but we should be able to figure out a certain set of rules that we can all kind of like sort of agree by. And maybe that's what's kind of playing out here with the wokeness and the conservativeness and the left and the right. And you mentioned this maybe in the last episode about the conversation around transgender, and like it's such a small, like in reality, it's such a small thing that affects like very few people. Like if you just on the scale of like how big America is, but it's like it was like the dominating conversation for like a couple of years. And I think it makes sense. That conversation being as big as it was only makes sense if you look at it from the perspective that it was a moral conversation. It wasn't really about transgender people, really. It was about how should we all view this and how should we all move forward.
Yeah.
But no, what do you think?
No, I mean, there's a lot of things I think. Well, number one, I do agree that, I often felt that it was really harsh, the way in which sometimes people talked about being white, and that, you have no culture. Oh, you're just Europeans, and, all you do is plunder and, colonize and empire and all of that. So yeah, that's a part of the history, but there is actually white culture, and it is good. There's a lot of good culture in whiteness, and I think so some of the stuff that came out of the kind of woke movement was offensive to people. Just, and they're like, if you insult somebody's culture or their religion or whatever, they're going to get offended. And then you're dealing with offense and, feeling offended, and you're not actually dealing with the underlying thing, which was the point was to say, please recognize this history and how we can fix it. The second thing is, I don't know that I have never seen it. I work in lots of, I work with companies. I also work in government organizations. I get government grants and things like that. I have never, ever seen, and if anyone's out there that has seen this, please let me know. I have never seen a quota. I have never seen that don't hire white people. You need to have 3 Black people. There was tracking. They would ask you, do you have a diverse board, for example, and things like that. But I was never dinged for, my board is all white with maybe somebody who's a little bit, Hispanic. I'm half white, and I would put, I'm half, I'm mixed race, right? So that's I think, and that leads me to the third point, which is that I don't believe there's a lot of sincerity in some circles around this argument about wokeness. That I think it was used as just like abortion was used and just like trans people are used, it's used as a way to make you mad so that you don't actually look at the fact that, well, if you look at the issue of abortion, yeah, it's not great. Nobody wants to have an abortion, but we need to have it be legal for lots and lots of reasons and for some people. And yeah, we don't like, we want to have some diversity, but we don't want to be insulting people. We can look at these things. They're trans people, that there's very few trans people and they don't affect your life. They have nothing to do with you. 99.999% of the people in this country don't have any relationship with a trans person, right? So I think that I always come back to this, that these arguments get weaponized against us and manipulate us into having these arguments with each other. But you can see how we can have these conversations, and I can see where you're coming from. And I think you're being rational and logical about saying, can we not Can we not, make it not okay for white men to have jobs? Of course. It's the same thing about, like, I know in the University of California system, there are a ton of Asian kids. And a lot of them don't get, and some of them are my relatives on the Indian side who did not get into the universities with the 4.0 or the 4.2 average and, did everything right. And they didn't get into the University of California system. And they said, well, it's because I'm Asian, and that there's some facts to that. Yes, at some point, the university system had to say, if we just take 100% of everybody who applies who has over 4.0 and over whatever the score is in the SAT, that's like the great score, we're only going to have Asian people. And we need to have diversity, not because, Asian people don't deserve it, but because they need to be in a place where there are people of other cultures and ideas and backgrounds so that there is diversity of conversation and diversity of experiences and all of that. And I think that's perfectly valid. But I also understand how if you're an Asian kid who's worked really, really hard and wants to get into UC Berkeley and you can't because they've hit some kind of line about having too many Asians, that would piss you off. I get it.
I think that brings about like a harsh it brings about like a harsh reality. So if like you're one of those kids that can't get in because you're Asian, then the reality becomes like, what school do I go to? Like, do I go to Wisconsin, or like, do I go to somewhere where like maybe a whole bunch of Asians don't really want to be just because like that's where I go now? But then to me, I immediately jump to, okay, so you get priced out of your neighborhood, or you get priced out of, there's gentrification. Like, okay, now I can't be here anymore. Like, where do I go? Or the jobs with the federal government. Okay, they're going to fire me. Where do I go? And it kind of comes back to that whole fairness thing. Like, what is fair, and then how do you deal with something that might not actually be fair? You meet a very harsh reality that says like these are your actual options, and it might not be fair, but what do you do? Do you accept that? Do you fight? Do you run?
Well, I mean, you were talking about COVID and how this religious scholar was talking about how COVID, the safety issue, became like a god. Like, I'm just going to be safe and wear my mask and get all the vaccines and things like that. And I think why the vaccination, again, which I think was weaponized, I mean, people took advantage of the fact that some people felt personally affronted that they were being required to get a vaccination in order to work. I understand that. Like, if I was not sure and didn't trust the whole vaccination process and the big pharma that was behind it, whatever, I can't remember now, whichever company was behind the first rollouts of the vaccine, I understand that from a personal perspective, how that infringes on your personal liberty, your own sense of right and wrong and morality and all of those things. And the same thing with the kid, trying to get into UC Berkeley, which, by the way, they just get into Caltech or MIT or Stanford. I mean, they'll still find places that'll take them. It just might be not UC Berkeley, where it's a lot cheaper, for example. But the difference is, and this is another moral foundation for me, is that there's a difference between what's valuable to me and important to me and safety for me versus what's safe for the entire community. And that this is, a back and forth that we go along with this country, where on one hand, we're rugged individualists. On the other hand, we're the big melting pot. Are we individualists or are we community people? Are we part of this tribe or are we on our own? And so there's a lot of people who felt like, I'm a rugged individualist. I'm a maverick. I am on my own on the prairie with with the straw hanging out of my mouth, whatever, chewing my tobacco and looking at the horizon. And I'm not getting your fucking, vaccine put into me. Hell no. Like, what are you putting into me? And then there's others who are like, what about the children? Everybody needs to get vaccinated because we don't know what's going to happen. And both of those are valid. And we have to balance those out. I personally didn't have a problem getting vaccinated. I understood how it worked, and it wasn't giving me COVID. It wasn't injecting anything into me. There were no microchips in me. I didn't believe any of that stuff. But if they were right, if it turned out they were right, I would be a fool, and I would have, sacrificed my own health and well-being at the service of, some government that was out to put microchips in me, or, Microsoft or Fauci being a bad guy or whatever. But I think I turned out to be fine. It protected me, and I'm okay. But you see that balance between like individualism versus collectivism.
And maybe maybe that's a part of this whole moral discussion. I guess us being in the West and the Bay Area in particular, it would make sense that this might be at least one of the epicenters where we're having such a big discussion about that, because we've gone to the extents of individualism. We're right here on the edge of westward expansion. We're the farthest you get, and now it seems like where do we keep pushing it? Like do we keep climbing this ladder, or like do we maybe look back and say like maybe there's some other things that we need to include here, or maybe like along the way some more grounded principles are also needed here. And I don't mean grounded like San Francisco is not grounded, or, the Bay Areas. We're just this huge, we all have our head in the clouds thinking about whatever the next thing is. But I think it does maybe, the culture maybe does get us away from some roots. And I think we're only going to be able to climb higher or go further if we remember those roots, and also like integrate it with, the conservatism or the religious perspectives or the traditional perspectives. I don't think both are bad or both are like great, but I do think together, it like even like within the individual, you need a little bit of that individualism. You need to be able to say like, this is me and this is what I want and this is how I'm going to make it work. But I know like for me, like that is greatly tempered by the fact that, I have kids and a wife. So like I can go on my all week bender working, and drink nothing but coffee 24/7 and fast and not cook. But like you got a couple toddlers here that are hungry and want to
Other
play.
people, little people. Yeah.
But in the same way, I hope that people that are leaping ahead of me and doing, greater things than I'm doing, or making their own leaps in their own lanes, like maybe I hope that they figure out what they need to figure out and they do their thing, but they also think of me or my family when they're doing those things. Like maybe you go for your leap, you do what you got to do. I want to be supportive. I want advancement. I want us to move. I want you to do your thing. But, once you get there, I want you to look back and say like, hey, like these people are also here. These people share the same community. These people share, the same state. And I think a lot of people in power, or at least from my perspective, because, I'm not there, but it seems like it can be very easy to think that they just think about themselves. And I tend to have a perspective of that advancement is necessary. Hard decisions are necessary. And hopefully it's tempered by people who say like, hey, let's have some diversity. Let's have some equity. Let's have some inclusion. Or like, let's think about these people. Let's think about the people that are getting priced out of their homes. And hopefully that those two people, I think we kind of come from, I don't think we're too extreme, but I think we're actually probably a lot closer than what our voting card might say. And I think a lot of people are actually probably like that. It's just, it can be easy to take one thing and say, like, this is my thing. And then you kind of get caught up in this world where that's your thing. And now you have to abide by everything under that. You have to check all the boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I've experienced that working with the police department, where, I had to advocate for what I wanted, which was I was asking when I worked for the police department at San Francisco that we should do policing from a community policing perspective, and there should be neighborhood watches and public housing and things like that, and really help improve how the police relationships are with the community. But then I had to go to the community and say, you guys also have to help the police so they can actually solve crime. So, the no stitching. So I was in the middle. Nobody likes you when you're in the middle because you're just a punching bag for both sides. But let me give you a question about those people. So you look at the Bay Area and you see that the Bay Area has been from forever, along with like places like Boston, for example, and maybe parts of Texas, that there are places where industries come up and lots of great thinkers and ideas and all of that, and these creativity, and they tend to cluster around universities. And universities want to have that diversity, so you spit out these guys, often, particularly in tech, that are technically know what they're doing, but also have this kind of expansive view of what their purpose is in what they're doing. And yes, it's to make money and all of that, but it's like you look at like the Google guys. They knew what they could do technically, but then they also like, let's not do evil. Like, and then there's some AI people that are coming out and they're saying that we want to, create stuff that's helping humanity. But there's a lot of these people who, you ever read Ayn Rand? You ever heard of Ayn Rand?
I don't think so.
The Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged. So there's a certain generation that I'm in, that generation that grew up with a lot of us when we were teenagers read Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand wrote these books that she's originally from Russia, and she went through the whole communist revolution stuff. And then she came to this country. This is maybe like the 40s, maybe 30s, 40s. And she worked for a while, like writing scripts. And she was a very, very brilliant person. I don't say that she wasn't extremely intelligent, but she wrote these books that were fictionalized versions of her philosophy. And her philosophy was called Objectivism. And Objectivism is basically the idea that individuals, if you do what's right for you, you do what's right for the world. So she was completely anti-communist because she saw the destructive power of communism in Russia, in the USSR. And so a lot of us grew up reading that. I mean, it was kind of like a rite of passage. Everyone I know my age, at some point or another, picked up The Fountainhead, which was a story about an architect who was told to, build certain things a certain way and said, no, I'm not going to. And then the big book is Atlas Shrugged, where she portrays these brilliant people, men and women, who have all of this capacity in the world. And what if they went on strike? So they just shrugged off the world. They said, we're not making your machines. We're not running anything. We're not going to be your thinkers. We're not going to be your doers because you treat us terribly. The masses of people, suck up what we do, our talent, and then you spit us out and you don't care, and you go off and you're corrupt, and the masses are terrible and you guys are dumb and everything. So we get to control the world. So we're going to shrug off the world, the world, and we're going to run it. There are a lot of tech bros that believe in this. This is the foundation of where they come from. And right now they are having a field day with this idea that we get to now be the technocrats. We're going to run things. And we're going to do this. And we think this is highly moral. She created a very powerful moral structure, rational structure for why she believed this to be true. The outcome, in my perspective, after I became 18, 19 years old, I was like, this woman is like freaking crazy and horribly wrong-sided, because all it is just it's basically a booklet on how to be cruel to other people, But a lot of people think that, and to them, it's a moral structure that they follow. And if you listen to people like Mark Andreessen and Musk and a lot of those guys, you type in, do a Google search, who believes in Atlas Shrugged? Who is John Galt? That is the quote that comes from the book. Who is John Galt? And John Galt is the guy who goes on strike, who's like, and then they create this utopia where the God that they worship is the dollar sign. Literally. It is crazy, but they believe in that. And I know you're looking at me like, what are you talking about? Do some research and you will find out that this is a huge influence on people, and it's insane. To me personally, it's immoral, but it is a moral structure for people.
I think that's probably half of my moral, well, maybe not half, but I would say that's part of my moral structure. And we talked about this in in the last episode, where it was like, some people care about themselves, some people care about other people, but eventually, like, they both affect each other. And so even if you build, this whole utopia that's around the dollar, or like it's just objective, individualistic progression, you might build utopia, you might make things really great for people, but eventually it will collapse because like it will just come back around. Like it can't solely be driven by you, because it's kind of like that same example. Like I can go off and do my own thing, but eventually I'm not going to be able to go off and do my own thing if I don't have my family with me. And technically you can get a divorce and you can go be a deadbeat dad, like sure, but objectively is that, and maybe that's my question to you then. Objectively, like what is the best thing for somebody? And do you think people know what's best for themselves without being able to take into account what's best for other people?
Well, that's the challenge, I think, and this is what I think we're showing people, is that the individualism and rugged maverick and all of that, I respect that too. I think of myself that way. And then I have to balance, just like you're doing. You have to balance your responsibility and the fact that, yes, there are parasites on me who ask me for money, my children, or whatever. People have to also be part of the society. And the balancing of that is complicated, and I think is missing in our morality, which has become either, or if you look at communism versus capitalism. Capitalism is, I'm going to make a lot of money for me, and it's going to redound to the rest of the world because I will create factories for workers and all of that. And then you have communism, which is like, we need to be in control of the means of production. The people need to own it. Just like we own the national parks, and we own, there's certain things we all own collectively. But if you go one side or the other too much, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare if you have horrible capitalism that just eats away at everybody. And it's a nightmare if you have communism. So why don't we have a national morality that says we balance the two? I don't know.
What does that boil? So the national morality, I am in no position to weigh in on that. But, and it's a little bit over my head, but something that I can comprehend and would be a huge help if you were able to shed some light on, is what should the individual morality be? Is there an individual morality that might eventually just kind of be the de facto or organic national morality? Is that possible?
My gosh, my only, I would never prescribe a morality to anybody. Never. I think that's my morality, is allow people to be who they are and allow them to discover what works for them. And then have some structure so that your exploration of your morality doesn't hurt other people. That's what laws are. Basically, that's what laws are. Like, your morality could be like, oh, I see that diamond in the window of that store. I'm going to go take it because I deserve it. There is a kind of morality, like, there's like influencers who are like that. Like, I'm the spoiled girl and I get everything. And, and they think that everything's supposed to be given to them. That is a certain, morality, but we have laws that say, no, you cannot do that. You don't get to get everything. But then the freedom to design that yourself, to come up with your own ideas, to have your experiences and to interpret those experiences and weigh things and learn. I think we have to give some guidance to kids about like what's right or wrong. Like, you don't bully, you don't hurt yourself, you don't, you have some respect for your elders, just things like that, just because it keeps them safe so that they can grow up and they can design their own morality. But I think that my saying everybody should design their own morality is very threatening to other people who want us to believe in their morality and fear that if you don't believe in their morality, that the whole world is doomed, or that they're somehow going to be doomed or something. So, yeah.
If you could give, so do you think America is decent? Do you think we're doing like an okay job? And where would you, if you could pick like one thing for us to improve on, what would it be?
We should talk more like this. We should talk more with each other like this. Like not go into our corners and just be like, you guys are all stupid, or you guys are, whatever each side says about each other. We shouldn't be doing that. That's so destructive to us. And just have conversations with other people. And by the way, that's how, if you think you think someone's in a cult, you don't get them out of a cult by insulting them. If you think somebody is, being immoral, you don't get them out of being immoral by insulting their beliefs. You have conversations and you convince people and you show them love and care, and you make it safe for them to explore what their different thoughts are and feelings are about things, and let them come to their conclusions. And sometimes they won't agree with you, probably most of the time, and you've got to be okay with that. And you've got to live in a world where people don't agree with you all the time. That's all I got. What about you?
If we could do that, I can name quite a few areas of my life that would be, dramatically improved if we could do that. So that'd be a great start.